Welcome to this live TV5 News special report, Maine's 2nd Congressional District Debate. Now here's your moderator, Catherine Pegram.
In less than 3 weeks, Mainers will decide who will go to Washington to represent them in the 2nd District Congressional seat. Current Congressman Mike Michaud or challenger Kevin Ray. The matchup is a familiar one. 10 years ago, these two men also faced off at the ballot box. Congressman Michaud won that race and has held on to the seat ever since. This election, we want to give you a chance to ask the candidates why they deserve your vote and a chance in the nation's capital. We'll be taking your phone calls, your tweets, your Facebook questions tonight. Our phone number is 947-9380. You can also tweet questions using hashtag TV5Debate, or you can post a question on our Facebook page, WABI TV5. First off, though, a brief introduction of both of our candidates. Democrat Mike Michaud was born in Medway and lives in East Millinocket. That's also where he worked at the Great Northern Paper Mill for 29 years. That's when he went off to Washington, where he was elected to the House of Representatives. Before that, he served in the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. Republican Kevin Ray was born in Eastport and lives in Perry. He's the owner and operator of a longtime family business, Ray's Mustard Mill. He was elected to the Maine Senate in 2004 and has served as the president of the Senate for the last 2 years. He also worked as the chief of staff for Senator Olympia Snowe and was a district director when she was a U.S. representative. Now, again, we're taking your questions tonight for the candidates. You can give us a call at 947-9380. You can also post them on our Facebook page. Then is WABI TV5, or tweet them at hashtag TV5Debate. Just so you know, tonight each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer a question. There will be a time for a rebuttal if it's felt necessary, and we'll alternate who gets to answer each of the questions first. We actually do have a question from a caller right now on the phone that we'd like to get to start off. Doug from Franklin has a question about TRICARE and military health care, and we'll start tonight with questions being answered by Congressman Michaud.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug. What's your question tonight? Doug, can you hear us? Hi, Doug from Franklin. Are you there tonight? All right, well, we'll wait to work out our technical questions with that, and I'll start with a question instead right now, one that will be asked the same of both of you, but in a little bit of a different way. There's been a lot of talk, obviously, this election season about how Washington is broken. So to you, Congressman Michaud, I would ask, how do you feel like you are a part of the solution and not the problem in Washington? And Kevin, how do you feel like you could go to be a part of Washington and be a part of the solution and not get mired in the problem? I'll let you answer first.
Well, when I first got elected to Washington, D.C., I took the same philosophy I took when I was president of the Maine Senate, when we had 17 Democrats, 17 Republicans, and 1 independent. We work across the aisle. Every day we met in the President of the Senate's office, go over the calendar in an informal way. What that did actually sped up the process, but the second thing that it did was it also, by having us in the room every day, it opened up line of communications and built up trust, and that's extremely important. When I went to D.C., I brought that same philosophy with me. If you look at the bills that comes out of the Veterans Affairs Committee, we've been able to pass a lot of major bills, primarily because we were able to work across the aisle. I'm a member of the Across the Aisle Caucus, which we have both on the House and the Senate side. I was just in D.C. just 2 weeks ago when we had a meeting with Joe Scarborough and Mika, and were able to talk about on the 113th what we might be able to do to move forward. The system is broken, but quite frankly, a lot of the problems over on the Senate side because of the filibuster. Whether you agree or disagree with the bills we're passing in the House, at least we're able to move the process forward. The problems in the Senate with the filibuster rule, and I'm one of a handful of members of Congress that filed a lawsuit against the United States Senate saying that the filibuster is unconstitutional. That will be heard in the federal district court in D.C., and hopefully they'll rule in favor that it is unconstitutional and force the Senate to change the filibuster rule, which will definitely help speed up the process, I believe.
All right. Mr. Ray, how would you respond to being in Washington and not getting caught up in the mess that many see down there?
Well, you know, I cut my political teeth working 17 years for Olympia Snowe, who has really distinguished herself, I think, and carried on a very proud Maine legacy in terms of bipartisanship and being constructive and working across the aisle. When I came to the Maine Senate 8 years ago, that is the same philosophy that I brought to bear in my work in the Senate. from the very beginning, working with Democrats and Republicans alike to solve problems. You know, when I was elected president of the Senate 2 years ago and took office, I began having dinner every Thursday night with the Senate Democratic leader, the House Democratic leader, and the Republican Speaker of the House. And the four of us had dinner together virtually every Thursday night for 2 years of legislative session. We did that in order to establish the kind of constructive working relationship that could allow us to work together to solve problems. That's what we do not see in Washington. You know, Mike talks about his bipartisanship, but yet during your time in Washington, you have been a person who has voted the party line, voting 93% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. I think that that is the kind of thing that has contributed to the problems we see. If you look at Senator Snowe and Senator Collins, they're sort of in the middle. And that's what I've done in Augusta. It's the reason that my Senate colleagues in Augusta voted me most likely to influence the other side of the aisle.
All right, Mr. Ray, I'll have you wrap it up right there, and Congressman Michaud will give you a chance to respond to that.
Absolutely. When you look at the voting record in Congress, most votes are very easy votes. It's not party line votes. And one of the things I've been focused on is making sure that whatever we do in Washington benefits the state of Maine. I've been very lucky to be able to get a lot of bills amended so they do benefit Maine, so then we're able to get them passed on. My opponent talks about working in a bipartisan manner, but yet when you look at the difference between his tenure as President of the Senate and my tenure as President of the Senate, we did not ram bills through, and when you look at some of the partisan bills that he rammed through, like voter suppression bill, which is just unfortunate, and the fact that they established or increased the Republican lounge or workstation, that's not how you bring people together. It should be joint
you wrap
together.
It up right
so.
there. And again, now another chance for rebuttal, Mr. Ray.
I'm so glad actually to have an opportunity to respond to that, because what I'm very proud of in terms of my tenure as Senate President, we had a majority. We had a Republican majority in the Senate. We weren't forced into a 17-1 situation. We had the majority, and we chose to work across the aisle. We passed 5 bipartisan budgets. We passed sweeping reforms. My regulatory reform bill passed 35-0. We brought both parties together to make things happen. As for this lounge, this is, of course, the subject of this ad that the Portland Press-Herald has deemed false, a whopper, among the most misleading ads of this season, because it's simply not true. We don't even have a lounge. There's a conference room with workstations in it. It's been publicized, it's been in the paper, and frankly, I think you should be ashamed of your ad. And I think I would ask you tonight to take it down, because the Portland Press-Herald, hardly a bastion of republicanism, has said that it is a whopper and perhaps the most misleading ad of the season.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to have to let that one sit for right now. I apologize. This is a lot of back and forth, but we really want to do to get to some of our viewer callers and questions tonight. Let's get back to Doug from Franklin. He has a question about TRICARE and military health care. Good evening, Doug.
Hi, Mr. Michaud. I know that you have done things for the veterans, but I want to know why you haven't signed on as a co-sponsor of one of the House resolutions to protect TRICARE beneficiaries from unfair fee hikes. There's H.R. 6266, Military Health Care Protection Act of 2012, H.R. 652, H.R. 1092, H.R. 1285, H.R. 4013, and you haven't co-sponsored any of them. I spent 20 years in the Coast Guard serving this country. I can't afford the fee increases that are being discussed, and I would ask what you would do to stop it.
All right, thank you for that question tonight, Doug.
That's a very good question, Doug, and I'm opposed to increasing fees, whether it's on TRICARE or any other fees, particularly as it relates to our veterans. I've been a strong supporter, as you mentioned, of our veterans, and will continue to be a strong supporter, and I do not support increasing fees on TRICARE. I think there are ways we could actually streamline the process, whether it's TRICARE and the VA and the public sector, to make it more efficient for our soldiers and our veterans, but I do not support increasing the fees for TRICARE for military men and women.
Mr. Ray, how would you respond to that?
Well, likewise, I'd be very troubled by the prospect of significant fee increases for veterans who have served our nation honorably, who have put themselves in harm's way to protect the freedoms that we so often take for granted. You know, my father was a veteran of World War II. And late in his life, as he faced health issues, I used to drive him from Washington County to Togus for his medical appointments. And I've sat there in the waiting room with him, with veterans of various conflicts from World War II up until the more recent conflicts. And I've seen how important the healthcare system is for our veterans. I feel passionately about it. It's something that's deeply personal to me. I know Congressman Michoud serves on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I would say that any politician or elected official has an obligation to do his or her utmost for our veterans. It's not a matter of partisanship. Of course, veterans bills pass with bipartisan support, as they should, because it's something that should unite us as Americans.
All right, let's get to our Facebook questions tonight. Our first one coming in from Facebook says, do you support the insurance reform passed by the Maine House this year? This one from Eileen Broderick. I'll let you start, Congressman Michoud.
No, I absolutely do not. That was one of the bills that was rammed through the process without the Bureau of Insurance really having a chance to evaluate that particular legislation. One of the things that's really devastating about that legislation is if you look at the people that it will affect, it's Eastern Maine, Northern Maine, and the people that benefit the most from it is from Southern Maine. You look at the huge increases for rural Maine, that's devastating. That was one of the bills that was rammed through the process in Augusta without the appropriate evaluation of the Bureau of Insurance, and we're going to see the negative impact of that particular legislation.
Hey, Mr. Ray?
Well, actually, it certainly was not rammed through. This was a bill that in the Maine Senate, we had long discussions about it. I actually brought Democratic senators into my office, and we negotiated Democratic amendments to the bill, and it passed with not only bipartisan support, but also the support of the one independent in the Maine Senate. Bear in mind, here in Maine, we have been witnessing year after year skyrocketing health insurance premium increases. And you know, we had a failed Dirigo program that failed to address the situation. So we brought reforms in that this year, for the first time, the increase, the average increase is less than 2%. This is after many years that we've had way into the teens, sometimes into the 20s and 30 percentile increases year after year after year. We could not allow that to happen. Now, that was last year that we passed the bill, not this year. This year, we took a look at the initial impact that we could see, and although there were many things that were working well in terms of the rate being lower, we were concerned that small groups where the average employee is older, as is often found in rural areas, that there was sort of a double whammy. So we went in this year, and on a bipartisan basis, unanimous votes of both the House and the Senate, we fixed that problem. And the insurance superintendent tells us that we're going to see, as a result of it, declining rates in rural areas.
I'd like to, yes, because actually today I just got this this chart that says Maine's new healthcare insurance law. The rates will soar for rural small businesses, and when you look at Northern Maine, on average, a small business with health insurance, their rates will go up as has gone up about 40%. Eastern Maine as high as 20%. Western Maine, 14.9. The areas that's benefited is actually Southern Maine and Central Maine, and that's very devastating for the real rural parts of the state of Maine, primarily, as Kevin did mention, because it does affect the workforce. If you're old, have an older workforce, not a younger workforce, and that's why we're seeing a disparity in where it's affecting the state. If you look at the former Bureau of Insurance commissioner, actually she mentioned about the changes actually affect older people, and those in rural areas will see a higher increase in their insurance premiums. This was an insurance bill, and we're seeing the ramifications of it.
Mr. Ray?
Yes, if I could, I'd like to to respond to that, because I know that the Maine Center for Economic Policy, which is a liberal special interest group, has put out these numbers. I'm sure we could look at other numbers that would show a very different picture. But here's the real issue. We looked at the fact that Maine has a broken insurance system where young people have been priced out. Young people in Maine were paying exponentially more for insurance than right next door in New Hampshire. As a result, they opted out of the system, leaving an older, sicker population to be insured. That drove everybody's rates up. These reforms are going to encourage young people to get back into the system to bring everybody's rates down. Now, these numbers you're looking at here do not take into account the reform we passed this year that is just taking effect now, that is we are hearing from the superintendent of insurance will result in lower rates. And that's exactly why we did it. The suggestion that somehow that I would,
15 seconds, please.
thank you, the suggestion somehow that I would not be concerned about rural Maine, I'm sorry, that is preposterous. I am a product of rural Maine. I live in a town of 850 in Washington County.
All right, that's going to have to be the end of that. We do want to get to some phone calls here. Frank from Milo has been holding for a little while. He has a question here about the East-West Highway proposal. Go ahead, Frank.
Hi, Mike. My father, Doug Appleby, used to work with you in the mill. And when you were in the state representative and Senate, you helped me with questions. And as you know, the mill has been sold by corporations, and the union has been successfully busted up in East Millinocket. And I was wondering, what are both of your opinions about the East-West Highway and in relevance to the kind of problems that Millinocket and other towns around Maine are having?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. Well, there's two issues, actually, when you look at the East-West Highway. One is actually when I first got to Congress, when we did the reauthorization, we were able to get in the Transportation Reauthorization Bill a high priority corridor designated from Calais, Maine and Watertown, New York. But that was a public system. And with that, it would bring additional funding. What the legislature did was actually set aside money for a study for a private highway. As far as a private east-west highway, I do have concerns with that as far as what is going to happen with eminent domain as it relates to a public entity. But I know the legislature had approved money for a study, so that is moving forward. When you look at Millinocket, truck weights is a big issue, particularly trucking all of the mill with paper. And with the increase in the truck weight, that's very important. Rail is also extremely important. We were able to bring the Surface Transportation Board to Presque Isle for a hearing when we were looking at the rail abandonment from Madawaska to Millinocket. And we were able to actually move forward in that regard. We got a $10.5 million federal dollars for the that rail line, which I know the state also put up some money. Rail is extremely important when you're looking at getting products out, as is trade. Trade is a huge issue, and we're dealing with a big issue that could affect whether or not they start number 11 paint machine up as it relates to the issue with Nova Scotia.
We'll have to let you wrap it up there and give Mr. Ray a chance at this question too.
Yes, the question about the East-West Highway, I believe it's an issue that deserves very careful study and scrutiny. I believe that it has potentially enormous economic benefit for the state of Maine, particularly the northern, eastern, western parts of the state. But there are questions that need to be answered, and there are concerns, and I believe the process requires absolute transparency, and that the questions around eminent domain be answered. I think it was wise that Senator Thomas of Piscataquis County requested the governor to put the study on hold until the legislature can fine-tune those issues and answer the questions and make certain that there can be absolutely no chance of eminent domain. That would be, I believe, an outrageous situation for a private project. So I want to see the results of that study. I think we all need to see the results of that study before we can make a determination. Is it feasible? Will it help lift the economy? And if it does, then it's something that I would like to see move forward, because Lord knows we need economic improvement and job creation in our part of Maine.
All right, let's go to Facebook for our next question tonight. This one coming in from Jimmy McHugh. Do you support elimination of same-day voter registration? We'll start with Mr. Ray.
Well, the people of Maine have decided to keep same-day voter registration, and I respect that position. I had felt that you know, there are over 40 states that require a waiting period so that the clerks have an opportunity to make sure that the voter lists are in order. That is, I said, the law of the land in 40 some odd states across the country. And it doesn't strike me as an unreasonable requirement. But the people of Maine spoke, and over the years I have developed a great respect for when the public speaks. They spoke decisively. They want to keep that law, and so I think that law should remain for the foreseeable future until the people of Maine should change their mind. It is something that Maine people have grown accustomed to, and they want to keep it, so I'm for that.
All right, how would you respond?
I'm definitely against eliminating same-day voter registration for a lot of reasons, and that's one of the issues I brought up earlier about when Kevin talked about working in a bipartisan manner. This bill was crammed through the process. It was a partisan bill, and it was intended to suppress voters from voting and registering on Election Day. And the big concern that I have is now what's going to come up in the legislature is voter identification to make it much more difficult for voters. If you look at the states around the country that have eliminated same-day voter registration or tried to eliminate same-day voter registration, they've been controlled by Republican Congress, legislature or governors, and this is something that they've when they go to school, whatever, they, I think, bring that up because if you look at the different states that try to eliminate it, it's pretty much been where Republicans control it, and that's wrong. That's wrong.
I think the congressman is confused. I could be wrong, but I don't know of other states that have. Not that many states have ever adopted same-day voter registration. Maine is one of just very few states that has ever had that law. So I'm not aware there wouldn't be a need to eliminate it because in 40 some odd states they've never had it. As for the allegation, which I recognize it's the political season and we're 3 weeks out from an election, so it's advantageous to try to paint somebody as taking a position for a particular reason. The suggestion that this was for voter suppression, I'm sorry, that is absolutely false. And I take offense at the suggestion that that was behind it, because if that is the case, do the 40 some odd other states that have it suppress the vote? Many of them, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Democratic states. So I just wish that we would not cast it in those terms.
Did you want a chance to respond to that one more time?
Yeah, I mean, it is voter suppression, and I think
in all 40 states?
If you look at the reasoning behind it as far as the abuse, there hasn't been. One of the big concerns that I have, particularly when you look at individuals who are registered to vote but might not have voted for a while, their name might be purged from the voting list. So if they go in on Election Day thinking that they're already registered to vote and they find out they're not, then they can't register. And that's wrong. And I think I'm glad the citizens overturned that overwhelmingly.
And I would just add, it's settled. I don't anticipate, I'm not going to be in the legislature. I'd be very surprised if it comes up again. It's settled.
All right, let's get to some of our viewer questions and comments again. This one, let's talk to Steve from Harmony. He's been on the line for a little while tonight, and he has a question about Bush tax cuts. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, we've had the Bush tax cuts for 10 years now. They were sold to us as a instrument that would help create jobs in our country. Corporate profits are at record levels, yet we don't seem to have any benefits as far as more jobs. Could you explain your positions on this issue?
We'll start with you, Congressman Michaud.
Yep. I'm opposed to extending the Bush tax cuts on the top 2%. The system's not fair when you look at the tax code. The middle class have all too often been taking the burden as far as what's happening here in Maine and around the country. I'm in favor of eliminating the Bush tax cuts, particularly for the top 2%, trying to make the system fair.
Go ahead, Mr. Ray.
Well, my position is that I'm very concerned about the notion of raising taxes right now. This has been, the past 4 years, the most difficult economy of our lifetimes. And we have seen people struggling with record joblessness, with high costs of gasoline. The thought that we're going to somehow encourage a better economy by raising taxes flies in the face of history. I will say this. I have declined to take the no tax pledge. And I do so as somebody who is not inclined to raise taxes at this time, given our economy. But I recognize we have a horrific problem in this country with debt. During the years that Congressman Michaud has been in Washington, the debt has increased at a shocking level. We now have a $16 trillion debt that threatens the future generations of this country. We need to be able to come together as Democrats and Republicans to solve this problem. So I don't think it's helpful to draw lines in the sand, and so therefore I did not take the pledge. Having said that, I'm not convinced, as I sit here tonight, that raising taxes on any of our Americans is going to be helpful to our economy at this time.
Go ahead.
That sounds like a Northwest pledge without saying it's a pledge. Well, unfortunately, when you look at the health care bill that the legislature rammed through, that does raise taxes on insurance for those individuals. The 1099 repeal that the Republicans was able to adopt in Congress, that increases taxes on individuals. You look at the deficit. When President Bush took office, he had a surplus. The fact of the matter, when Bush left office, he had 2 wars that were not paid for. He had the Bush tax cuts that were not paid for. He had the prescription drug bill. It was $1 trillion that was not paid for.
15 seconds.
And President Obama did add a little one with the stimulus bill, but a lot of it was already put in place. If you look at the Bowles-Simpson report and the Pete Domenici report, very diverse groups. Both groups looked at cuts as well as revenues. You can't solve the problem without looking at everything has to be on the table.
We'll have to let you wrap it
If
up
I-
right there.
Yes,
and
if I
yes,
could
give Mr. Ray a
respond, I
chance.
think we're getting a little glimpse here tonight of the problem in Washington, because a congressman puts everything in partisan terms. And as long as we do that, as long as we continue to put things in partisan terms, then we're going to have a very difficult time to solve the problems that this country faces. You know, with respect to the 1099, you just raised that. That is one of the examples where Congressman Michaud, who claims to be a Blue Dog Democrat, actually, frankly, breaks with the Blue Dog Democrats on a lot of issues, including small business. Now, the 1099 reform was a vital issue
Go
to
about 15 seconds on this.
small business people. And Congressman Michaud was the only member of the Maine delegation who didn't vote to fix it. He couldn't find, in fact, one vote in 2 years where he could stand with small business, and that's why he has a 0 rating.
All right. One more chance to respond for each of you, and then we'll need to take a break. Go ahead.
Respond to that, because I did propose legislation for the 1099, but it did not increase taxes on individuals. What it did do is actually pay for it by using the unfunded or the unspent stimulus money. As far as the NFIB issue, when I talk to businesses here in Maine, their big issue is access to capital. We were able to pass the Small Business Job Act that actually helped businesses with access to capital, and other legislation that helped small business move along. The NFIB chose not to rate those important pieces of legislation that affects Maine businesses. They chose on a lot of issues that has no direct effect on Maine, which I think is very unfortunate.
I need to respond to that, because I think, Mike, you need to talk to more small businesses, because I'm a small business person myself, and I've visited a lot of small businesses around the state. I can tell you there are a lot more issues than that one. It's not leadership to just pick one issue and say, well, there's one issue, and that's what I'm going to talk about. There are a range of issues, regulatory issues, tax issues, that have made it difficult for small business people to survive this economy, and they're looking to Congress for leadership and for help.
15
and
seconds.
we have many more issues than simply access to credit. Yes, it's important, but it's not the only issue. And NFIB is the foremost advocacy organization for small business with over 3,500 members here in Maine. and they deserve to be heard.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We will take a break right now. We will be back with our 2nd Congressional District debate after these messages.